If it's undercovered, underreported, or a waste of time, you can be sure we'll be heard. Nothing is off limits.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio. I'm Michael Morris. With me, and this is kind of a special moment, after over a year, we're going to let people actually see what Nate looks like. Nate, you're always on the ones and twos behind the scenes. How's it feel to actually be in front of the camera this time?
It's okay. I prefer behind the scenes, but
it is
behind
disturbing.
The camera.
Oh, sorry.
What?
I'm sorry. We've been saving this, and we were going to do this for episode 100, and then when we figured out that would be a year from now, we thought, let's not do that.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be such a letdown anyway. As you can see, it'd be kind of a letdown.
You look like a mountain man. Like if I
don't like being on mountains, so
the first time that I saw you, I will say I thought this guy probably rode here on a Harley. And is it fair to say there's nothing farther than the truth?
Correct.
Okay. But what you do know about is films, or as they say in Spanish, cinema. Películas.
True. It would have been funny if you would have just said films again. That's where I thought you were going.
Spanish-speaking people in Nebraska say movies. Why I wanted to bring you on is I think we might have touched sometimes on your background, but give people a little background on you were in Los Angeles and went to film school, right?
Correct.
So thank you for covering all that.
You pretty much did. I don't know what else you want me to say.
Well, I just thought like you might want to say what you studied there, not you wouldn't tour tickets.
Yes. So I attended the Los Angeles Film School. And
The Laugh.
Yep. That's actually LAFS, LA Film School.
Ooh, that doesn't sound laughs.
Laughs, yeah. Lufs.
Lofter.
Anyway, it's immersive film school, so I didn't have to go and like typical colleges. I didn't go to math or science. It was morning, day, night, all film school related courses, film related courses. So like writing, producing, directing, cinematography, editing, all of that stuff.
Why I think this is important is today what I want to talk about is the summer box office, and not so much what you should see or that kind of thing, but you and I have conversations every time we're talking about films or movie, and that what I was looking at yesterday is the summer box office is beating 2018 and 2019 numbers before pandemic numbers, where during the pandemic, they were saying that the days of big films were over, that it would be done. And I can remember after Endgame came out, they said that's going to be the last $1 billion movie you're ever going to see. And I thought, well, that's kind of like, how do you know what's coming? We're going to have 5 movies this summer that are going to go, well, let's not say just summer, but let's go into March through June. 5 movies that are going to crack $1 billion. Now, here's my question for you. Are these movies better today, or are people just going out and seeing anything?
I'd say a little bit of both. A little bit of both. You're going to have those movies that maybe aren't on par with even 2019, 2018, or earlier. But you've got those that, okay, movie theaters have opened back up, and there's nothing to do. Let's go see a movie.
Do you think it's weird that, as I've explained to people before, every Monday, my daughter and I see a movie every Monday for the last 12 years. So we were already going. What was nice about it is we were the only people in the theater. Like you didn't have to buy your seat ahead of time. You could sit, you could lay down in the theater. It wasn't a big deal. But what I think the advantage is we got to see, since there were no blockbusters coming out, they would show like Top Gun, the first Top Gun. To take my daughter to get to see that, or the first Alien in a movie theater that I never got to do as a kid.
Yeah.
There was something to that nostalgia of something you might have seen on TV to actually get that theater experience. But again, they kept saying that the box office will never recover. You being a film buff kind of guy, what do you see as the future of movies in cinema?
I think the days of those mid-range movies are probably gone. So your sub-$1 million.
So your indie stuff.
Your somewhat. Your art house and indie I consider different. So your art house stuff, you're going to always have that because those are some of the like A-list actor, A-list director, like baby projects. So you're going to always see those. I think it's big, huge blockbuster IP movies, and cheap horror movies. And what I mean by cheap, I mean horror movies are cheap to make. So from a
with like a
filmmaking-
$30 to $50 million budget, so it's not cheap, or even like 20. Like the Black Phone came out, that budget can't be more than $50 million. I wouldn't.
Yeah,
think.
I would guess probably maybe not even 20, because a lot of those are just super easy to make. Now, if they're super motion graphics heavy, visual effects heavy, then that's gonna. But typically, your horror movies and stuff like that aren't that expensive to make. That's why you see a ton of them, because they can make it for a small amount. Set it at the box office. It may not hit those numbers, but that's not what they're made for. They're made to, just hit, break 4 or 5 million or whatever, and then send them off to DVD or whatever, and
where they can kind of recoup their money, or that's where they make profit.
Yeah.
Did you see the story about the VFX artists? They came out and said Marvel is their most hated client because they have unrealistic expectations and unrealistic timelines. So a movie like Doctor Strange, like that is all via special effects.
Well, yeah.
And then people will complain because it looks cheaper. It looks, I think they call it the volume, is where if you ever watch The Mandalorian, they're on a soundstage.
Correct.
How would you define that? It's kind of like
it's a virtual studio is what it's what they're
Right.
calling it. So that's the Mandalorian really brought it to life, perfected it from a Hollywood level. But instead of using a green screen to film a lot of that, they have this huge LED wall that goes around 360. They've even got LED wall as the ceiling, and they can project what the background is. Like, for instance, with the Mandalorian, like the large vastness of like
well, like when he's on Tatooine, it looks like the sand goes on
correct.
for 1,000 miles. It's impressive.
Yes.
If you don't see it all the time. When you do see it all the time, and I'm not a nitpicker of movies. I'm a nitpicker of what the story structure might be. Like if the story doesn't make sense and the special effects are amazing, like Avatar. Nobody cares about Avatar. People can say they love Avatar. It's an amazing thing to watch, but really you've heard that story before. You know what I mean? So it's not new storytelling, but when you see it on a big screen or in 3D or whatever, it kind of takes you out of your seat into like that imaginary world.
Yeah. That the avatars are made for just that, getting out of your world and going into that world. It's not
You're
so much
building
the
an
story.
experience.
It's
Yeah.
the experience of the graphics and stuff like that.
But when you use it too much, you kill off, you know what I mean? Like every Marvel movie is going to use that from now on because that's a Disney thing.
True. The thing what a lot of people normal moviegoers, nor people that aren't into filmography or have made films or make videos or anything like that, there's visual effects and stuff everywhere. The really nice, when a visual effects artists, they say this all the time, they do their job when they're not being noticed. So there's
Kind of like an umpire. If you see it, like if the game is going well, you don't worry about the umpire. But if the game's going poorly and the umpire makes 1 or 2 bad calls, he blew it for the entire game.
Correct. So you can have a normal movie that's not huge VFX, like don't take Marvel in consideration, but just a normal movie. There's still probably a lot of visual effects in there that you don't really notice or think about. So like if a movie's set in Washington, D.C., for example, more than likely they're not filming in Washington, D.C. So there's a lot of set extensions. There's a lot of green screen or the LED wall, that type of thing that's being done just to put them from wherever they're filming in Georgia or Vancouver or whatever into Washington, D.C. as an example. A lot of those type of visual effects taking out, like if a plane's going by or whatever, painting some little things out. That's the majority of what visual effects do on most movies. Again, not including, your Marvel superhero movies.
If we took that out, though, so Top Gun Maverick, when you're watching that, you're thinking, Jesus, this looks so real. They actually use practical effects. So those jets were being flown by somebody else, obviously, but they're actually putting those people, those actors in jets and filming them in the practical effects, like their reactions to things, like the pressure that they're going through when they're going really fast. Like those were real. And you're just thinking, how great are these actors? No, it's because their insides were getting squeezed the shit out of. And the filmmakers spent the money to do the practical effect versus the special effects. That's what I think makes that movie so great, because really it's the same movie that you saw before, just amped up to 10.
Yes. But even in that movie, I can almost guarantee, and I don't know, I haven't seen any special features, or I don't have any friends in LA that worked on that particular movie, so I don't know for sure, but I can almost guarantee there was still a lot of special effects, visual effects that were utilized, encompassing that that stuff along with the practical effects.
If you were to say, because you were in film school, what, in the mid 2010, something like that?
Early, so I finished in 2008. So
okay,
2006 to 2008 is where I was.
So does your list of, say, your top 10 films of all time, has it changed that much? Because I can tell you right now, it's going to be hard to knock Godfather and Godfather 2 out of a perch and go. I would put, I'm trying to think of something. Like, I wouldn't put Top Gun Maverick in my top 10, but I would say that is, of the top 20 movies I've seen, and I've seen a lot, I think it's more the nostalgia factor, and I think it's more, it's just such a kick-ass movie. I would put it there, but it's going to be hard to beat the classic movies.
Yes, probably, unless you're a film buff, or maybe I would even take it a step further, like a cinephile or into filmmaking. I get asked that a lot. Like, what's your top 10 movies? It's hard to say because I can't.
You probably categorize things more. It's
exactly.
Not
I can't take Citizen Kane and compare that to Top Gun. Like, they're just two completely different movies. So I can't say, like, oh, well, this is going to go over this just because.
Well, don't you think it also comes down to preference? Like, if I ask somebody,
yes,
some dumbass I went to high school with, they're going to tell me, if it's a guy, they're going to tell me every movie, like Roadhouse will be in there.
Yeah.
Because those guys want to wear tight pants. But when I think about my personal top 10, like, my daughter and I always talk about this. Our preference, like, there are people that do not like Iron Man 3. I don't give a shit. There was a time in my life where that movie, we saw that 9 weeks in a row, 9 Mondays in a row. It was a time in my life that it meant something. So I would never say, oh, it's not a top 10 movie for me. It might not be for you. But I think if I looked at my top 10 of all time, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an amazing movie, right? Like, to bring that 60s, like that mid 60s, late 60s vibe and put it on screen where you feel like you've been transported there. That's what I want out of a movie.
Yep.
The Black Phone is in Denver, 1978. When they tell you that on the screen and then everything else matches, that's when you're like, yes, you've really done something there. What I wish we got more films like that. I think the problem is those are not movies that have the ability to make $700 million.
Yeah.
They are $145 million films, which is not bad. But if I'm a company, I want to make as much money as I can off the thing.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of forego the Chloe Zhao type of thing. Like, can she technically make something that you go, holy shit, that's dramatic and it looks beautiful and all that? Yes. But is it going to make $1 billion? No.
Really the only movies that are going to do that are going to be your big IPs, your big superhero movies. More than likely going to be all science fiction type movies that can hit that, because your audience is so worldwide, is how they can get to that. You can't, there's a lot of dramas and stuff that are really good they're making it for a specific audience. It's not necessarily gonna be well received. Something that's well received here in America may not be well received in
China or Russia,
China or Japan or whatever, because the cultures are just different. So their dramas don't necessarily translate here as well. There's caveats all over the place. One thing I want to get back to is something that you asked a little bit ago about the movie industry and how that's going to change going forward. I think other than your big blockbusters, I think you're going to see a lot instead of the amount of movies being made is going to shrink, and more series or limited series movies,
kind of like
being
Yellowstone
made
or something
for streaming.
See, I think that's horseshit.
Amazon, stuff like that.
The thing that bothers me about that is that I think there are some things that are 90-minute movies or 2 hours.
Yeah.
That are being turned into 6 half-an-hour show. Take Walking Dead. Walking Dead as a series works. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As a movie, there's too much information to pack it all in.
Oh,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
But at some point you start running out of material. So you have these filler episodes. So we gotta get 18 or 22 of these things out. So you have those filler episodes, which everybody gets pissed off about because they don't realize until the end, like, oh great, Rick Grimes isn't in this, right? But while I love series, there's so many series. Like I've told you to watch Severance. That's on. If you want to watch anything, watch Severance on Apple Plus. What do you call that?
Yeah, Apple Plus.
I just happened to turn it on. The trailer looked interesting. I like the people in it. It kept me rooted for the 8 or 9 episodes. But because all those people are trying to in other movies or series or whatever, it might be 2 years until they do season 2. So they've set it up for season 2. So hopefully your interest stays that long, right?
Yeah.
But I want to get back to, go ahead.
Another show that if you've not seen, shame on you. So I'm saying shame on him. Stranger Things. Stranger Things is such a great show because I was thinking about this the other day. I think because I was asking if you had seen it and then just got me thinking about it, how it takes so many different genres and brings them together. You've got your kind of campy comedy. You got your 80s because it's set in the 80s. Horror elements, even though it's not really horror, but it's got those elements in there. Comedy, romance, all of that compacted together. I think the Duffer Brothers did such a great job.
I think I've not seen that show, but I'll give you an example of like the reason I didn't watch Game of Thrones until Game of Thrones was off. And then out of the 7 seasons or 8 seasons, 7 seasons?
I think 7.
First 4 seasons are amazing. Season 5, I cannot get through the thing. So then I'm looking and I'm like, why is my interest waning? So, of course, I like to do the research on these things. And you find out that Benioff and Weiss did not know how they were going to end it because the book wasn't even done by George R.R. Martin. So he didn't tell them. Once they ran out of source material, they failed. The difference in Stranger Things is they made it. They know they have an ending. They know what they're doing.
They knew from before they shot the first episode how they were going to end it, how many seasons they wanted to do.
Well, it's like George Lucas with Star Wars.
Yeah.
So Disney says, well, we're going to make our own thing, not using the source material, getting rid of all the people that are meaningful to our generation and failing on a big scale because you don't understand the lore of what you're doing. Like the Green Lantern movie. The people, Ryan Reynolds liked the Green Lantern, but nobody else working on the project even understood it. So it's one of the movies that people go, what a piece of shit. If you knew the backstory or if you had read the books as a kid or whatever, it's still following the same path. They adapted source material. It's that the audience doesn't understand what they're watching, right? So it's a failure the MCU makes it easy because any movie you can pick up and play and there's not anything there's no real serious stakes until you got to Infinity War and Endgame.
Yep.
Or as someone in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. But what I see is a lot of stuff is content. You always hear about content. And so when we were talking about, like, I turn on my Netflix maybe once a week and I just scan through it. And if I do watch something, it's Arrested Development, which I've seen 100,000 times because I'm looking for that comfortable thing to watch rather than, am I going to invest my time in, what was that Ryan Reynolds thing that came out?
The Adam Project?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that one that he did with The Rock. See, I don't even know what they're called. those are things that if they would have been announced in 2015 that have come out 2016, I'm there. Maybe my attention span is different, but there's so much content. It's tell me what's good. And I think we had more options before, but people would go, oh man, you got to go see that. Like you got to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Ford versus Ferrari. That's stuff that you can't miss. Like, I don't know anybody goes, that's shit. You know what I mean? I don't know one person said, even people that don't like cars. Like you got into watching F1. You love that movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a car guy.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I watched NASCAR, but like I didn't watch open wheel racing. That made me start watching it. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's enough content that's being made that you're just like, I can't miss. Stranger Things is a thing. Game of Thrones. Lord of the Rings is coming out. Not based on any of the shit that was written before. They're just making up their own thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
But does it offend you as somebody that you like those movies, right?
Yeah.
I saw half of the first one and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. Which I think, see, a lot of people think, oh, that's a piece of crap because.
Yeah, I'm not saying it is.
Yeah, no, that's what so it's nice to hear that, oh, it just wasn't for me, which I think is phenomenal. One of my biggest pet peeves is when they go see a movie or watch a show and they're like, oh, this is the worst piece of crap that's ever been made.
We have a friend like that this every Wednesday says that to us. He saw the Batman and he goes, what a piece of woke garbage.
Yeah.
And my response was, get the fuck away from us because we're talking about something else.
Yeah.
Because
I had to pull you apart. You guys were fighting.
Well, I just don't. Here's what I don't like. You couldn't make a film like that. So when I'm trying to explain, that literally is beat for beat what's a novel that's called Batman Year One.
Yeah.
It is that story. And so I said, do you own that graphic novel? Yes. So are you mad at the thing that you bought before that they put on the screen and now you don't like it? He doesn't like it because it's Robert Pattinson. He doesn't like it because Catwoman is this. And it's just like, I can't take your thoughts on movies seriously. But he saw The Northman and thought that's the greatest movie ever. It is very good. It is not the greatest movie ever. Right? I mean, it is stunning to watch, but you've seen that movie. You saw Hamlet because The Northman, Hamlet is based on The Northman. But no one's like, you know what we should make? A movie about a Nordic barbarian, right? I appreciate that they even made that effort. Rarely do I see anything and I just go, that's absolute shit because I can't make it. But you could look at it and go, technically, that's not a good movie.
Yeah.
So it's got to be, when we're talking about movies, I always defer to you. Like, I can tell you what I like.
Yeah.
But I just appreciate that somebody was able to get it financed, to get it made.
Yeah.
I mean, those two things right there.
Hardest things to do is right there.
What's the thing called? The blacklist? No. There's lists of films, these scripts that are not produced. And they're always, these are the things that should be made and no one's made them yet.
Yeah.
And I think The Northman was one of those things. Like it's been sitting there since 2015.
Oh yeah. And which is not an unheard of thing. So if you're not familiar there, especially in Hollywood, when a script is written, which depending on who writes it could take a year or could take half a year or whatever, whether they were hired on to do it or they wrote it themselves, more often than not, it's still not going to get made for another 3-5 years, sometimes even longer.
That's even if you can get slotted for production.
Yeah. That's one thing I like, the fact that, and I think your opinion doesn't matter. No, I think
it never goddamn matters.
It never matters. No, where I think it differs is I like the fact that there's so many options. From a filmmaking perspective, means that there's more yeses that are being given, more green lights that are being given, more things being financed that can then go into production and be made. Now, sometimes the mark doesn't always get hit, but that at least people are taking a chance on it. And new IPs like Stranger Things and a lot of things like that, instead of just rehashing source material.
Right. I want to ask you this. I'm so glad you said this. What is the thing that pushes it over for a film to get made?
Depends on who's attached to produce it.
Is it producer or actor first?
It depends. It can be one, it could be the other, it could be both, could be neither. It could be a studio that just is like, hey, we have this IP, hiring, here's the writer, here's a producer, go and write something. Not necessarily greenlit yet, but we're hiring you to go write it. We like the script. Okay, greenlit. We don't like it. Put it on the shelf or hire another writer.
Do you get paid in advance for that? So we're going to put this in production. Do you get paid for it, or you have to produce something and then we're going to buy it in the room?
No. So they, if it's that scenario where a studio hires a writer, they're hiring them, whatever the amount is, $100,000, $50,000, whatever their fee is to write it, they'll go off, they'll write a script, bring it back, and then they'll decide if they want to produce it, if they want to put it in their slate, if they want to put it on their shelf. Hey, we don't like it, we're going to hire another writer, which is not unheard of either. So even if you see in the movies written by so-and-so, doesn't necessarily mean...
I'm also glad you brought that up because...
So-and-so, there could be 5 other so-and-sos before getting to the position of...
I don't want to get you off track, but I feel like we're going to skip this. Anytime you see a bad movie, there's always 3 writers, right?
Well, yeah.
I'm talking about a 90-minute to 2-minute, and there's 3 writers. So like Morbius. Now, here's the thing. I didn't hate Morbius, but I've seen it before. It was called Venom, and Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I didn't hate it. I know a lot of people think, oh, it's such shit and blah, blah, blah. I understand it's not for you, but I also don't want to see Parasite. That's not for me. Yeah. Like, I might like it, but I probably would be bored shitless. I like to be entertained by that, and I like that they're taking chances on that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But when you look and see how many people actually touch that script, and that's the only ones credited, like you said. Correct. So there could be a writer's room of 12, like the King James Bible. Like, we got to put this in or take this. I think there's so much studio interference in projects like that.
Yeah.
You don't know why it was bad. You just know somebody turned that thing sour. I'm sorry. I just want to get that in there because... Okay.
And that's the other thing with when it comes to studios is that everybody needs to have their finger on the project. So if you're in the big studio system and you've got all those executive producers, you've got the studio producers, everybody wants to put their finger on, hey, I had this put in the movie or whatever. Anyway, I can go off a tangent.
I forget Michael Nesmith of the Monkees said, because they were talking about when the test pilot came out, everybody hated it because, and this is his phrasing, is that the kids were assholes. Like they were kind of sarcastic and like me, you know what I mean? Like the original one, somebody comes into a record shop and they're not being funny. They're more mocking the older guy that's trying to buy it. Mm. And he said when they changed it to where they were just 4 guys that got along and there was no pairing off, it was like they always did something in a group. And he said that was one of the 1,000 followers of victory, is everybody claims it was their idea. But one of the things that sold the show was their auditions, their black and white auditions. When they put that in the front of the shows, it brought people back to see if they would do Davey or Mickey or Peter or whatever. And they put it in the beginning of those shows. Then the show took off. But everyone will claim I saved the show because I put that here. And I think studio executives, especially in the Disney situation, I think that they are constantly like, you know what? Let's put this cameo in here and not waste it. But I don't want to give away the Thor one. I'm trying to think. Thanos, the original time that you saw Thanos on screen, the special effects on it were not great. They were a little off. The coloring was off from what you saw. But it drew you into the next one because what's the stinger at the end or the end credit thing to continue the next story? Some executive is going to say, I'm the one that came up with that idea.
And I've been wanting to do this for 50 episodes. That's going to do it for this week at Broad Street Radio. We'll see you next week. Ha ha.